This is our 11th session of living this year as if it is our last. We're getting closer and closer to dying with 1 month left. We will die at our June session. Not literally, I hope, but we will practice dying. So we continue to remind you of how much time is left to live and asking you what remains for you to be done before you die. It's like cramming for the exams now. We begin with our stone ritual. So please remove last month's stone from where you placed it to be visible for you this month, and take this month's stone out of your dwindling stone collection and put it where it will be a visible reminder for you of the passage of time this month. And just think about how many stones have been taken in since we started this, and it's really time to take a moment, I think, to contemplate that passage of time and how close we are to dying. So just take a moment and think about that. Thank you. Before we move into our opening meditation, a reminder, although we will die at the next session in June, we will meet for a last time in July, on July 15th. The purpose of the July session is to reflect on the experience of living the past year in contemplation of dying, to debrief the experience of dying, and to give Ruby and me feedback on this course, what worked, what didn't, and what could have been different, etc. We might also talk about how to continue meeting in your small group if you'd like to. So please plan to attend that July session if you can, and we'll be sending out an email with the details after our June meeting. So we're now going to move into a few minutes of meditation, including a bit of guided meditation to fully arrive for our gathering here today. So start by closing your eyes or taking a soft gaze and not focusing on anything in particular. Check your posture to ensure the balance between comfort and alertness. And bring your attention to your breath as it moves in and out of your body. Focus on the breath in whatever way you can so you can follow its movement. Follow the inhale and the exhale. Take 3 deep breaths, noticing each moment of the inhale as you breathe in deeply, and each of the exhale as you breathe out. After the 3 deep breaths, allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm. You can continue focus on your breath or listen as I continue to guide the meditation. You're now 1 month away from dying. What does that evoke for you? What are the emotions or mind states that arise with this thought? Is there fear, love, grief, relief, regret, curiosity, compassion for those you are leaving? Combinations of feelings. Now imagine your loved ones. What does the fact that you're this close to death evoke for them? What emotions or mind states do you imagine arise for them with this thought? Love, grief, regret, fear? Stay with these images and feelings for the next minute or so. If your mind drifts off, gently bring it back to these images and feelings. Finally, to begin our work together today, I'm going to light the candle in the tradition of Saging International. If you have a candle that you want to light. The candle symbolizes the wisdom in each of us and the wisdom in all of us. And here's our poem for our work together today. It's Shakespeare's 73rd sonnet. That time of year thou mayest in me behold. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few do hang, upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that with which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well.
Did everyone hear the very end of that poem? To love that well which thou must leave ere long. So we're now going to move into breakout rooms for our check-in. And as you all know by now, although we share a slide that suggests the usual topics for discussion, please feel free to share whatever it is that's up for you, whatever it is that's moving you now in terms of this year to live. And so here's the slide with the suggestions. How did this year to live practice go for you this month? Anything from the monthly practice resonate with or strike you? anything from the reading resonate with or strike you? And Brenda will put those into the chat. And that will go into your breakout rooms so that you can refer to them. Thank you, Brenda. The reading for this month was chapters 34 to 36. And as a reminder, here was this month's monthly practice. Dedicate more time to family and friends. Recognize that they, like you, are constantly being swept away by the stream of impermanence. Start a group project for the needy. If possible, visit an AIDS ward or hospice, a ward for burned children, a home for the aging, etc. Recognize that mishap is not a punishment from God, but simply an event that can be used as a teaching in mercy and self-awareness. Explore the difference between pity and compassion. Recognize that even good works done well will not keep illness, old age, and death away, that God and the nature of things will not and need not protect us. And finally, understand that we have already inherited all we need to survive our death with our heart open and our mind focused on the brilliance of our original nature. So Brenda's going to open the breakout rooms in a minute. If you find yourself alone, please wait for a few minutes before coming back into the main room. We may be finding others who are also alone in their breakout rooms and join you together. Or even if you're not alone, you may find someone new with you because there may be one person from a group who's now going to join you. So please be as friendly and open as you can to meeting new people in this breakout room. Any questions? Probably not, since this is the 10th time we've done this already. So Brenda will open the breakout rooms. You'll have 25 minutes to talk about how this practice has gone for you in the past month. See you. Did anything come up that you'd like to share? Anything, now that we're 10 months in and that much closer to considering our dying, anything come up that surprised you? Actually, we're 11 months in. Sorry. Bill.
Yeah, I don't know if it surprised me or not, but it did. In reading chapter 34 about the that the desire to do more, like the feeling that I got so much more to do. I need to accomplish so many more things, and that it's this insatiable desire to continue to try to accomplish. So, which is why I'm so busy. With being chief financial officer for two nonprofits, and being on a couple of commissions locally in the county and in the city, and I'm like, why? This chapter actually got me to sit back and say, why am I doing all of these things? When is enough enough? Because and that the cause of my suffering is the desire itself. I thought that was such a great line. And it really kind of set me back on my heels. It's like, oh my God, I'm doing it to myself. This is kind of like an self-inflicted misery because I'm, and I'm trying to do something that will never be satisfied. I mean, that desire to do more and to accomplish more will never ever be satisfied. And so it really helped me to just kind of uh, imagine that I could actually drop it and just and just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in a wisdom circle, and one of the participants in our last meeting announced that they had let go of almost all of their activities. And I stopped breathing for a moment, to be honest, because I couldn't imagine how to do that. I just could not imagine it. I'm trying to, but I couldn't. So, yeah, I hear you. And I think it's great to look at what it is that moves us, to keep signing up for things, to keep saying yes. I know that's an issue for me, as anyone who knows me will tell you. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything else come up in your breakout room that you'd like to share? Gary.
Well, just along that same line, the contrast to that insatiable, hungry ghost of need to do more and attachment and desire is that experience of finding our lotus, that place of just embracing our original face and just being in the present with nothing to do, nowhere to go, no desires, just absolute sense of this is enough. This is all. This is abundance. This is, life in the moment to be lived as richly as possible. And those moments are kind of antidotes to my own insatiable craving to do more and not enoughness. And so it was a beautiful kind of description of that finding the lotus. I can contemplate, the feet in the mud and the blossom in the sunshine. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. One thing that came to mind as you were speaking was one thing that came up in my breakout room conversation was this notion of liminal space, the space in between,
Mm-hmm.
and how uncomfortable that space can be. And I think some of the reason I keep myself busy is to try unsuccessfully, but still try to avoid the discomfort of that space of simply being that is sometimes the space of not knowing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Carol. Carol, did you want to?
Yeah, no, I do. Sorry, there.
There you go.
Um, we talked about how at this point in the course, things that are anything connected to death or grief, how there's an intensity more of landing differently is the best way I can say it. The impact of these things happening. So, and it felt like the three of us, everybody knew what the other was talking about. And so if you experience the death of somebody during this training or a situation of deep grief, it's intensified. And I woke up at this point probably a week ago, 10 days ago, from the moment before I opened my eyes with an overwhelming sorrow, just so deep and so specific. It was imagining my children, the grief, all the losses they will experience in their lives, all the griefs, all the deaths that they won't be able to escape, and feeling the pain of knowing they will suffer. And that sort of trap of motherhood of no matter how much one may know, you can't stop it. No matter how old they are, no matter what the experiences are, it's theirs to have, but still wanting to spare them from the suffering. I think I cried on and off for 3 hours that day because it was so real, so very real in a way that I could say it was unlike anything I'd experienced before, of something that has not yet happened, uh, and of knowing the reality of it. You know, the old all love stories end in death, whether it's divorce or death, whatever it is, whether it's a love story with your parent, your sibling, your best friend, your mate. And that's just the reality, and how a part of me I've realized has been sort of cavalier, even though I know that intellectually. There's a real reckoning of, no, this is not an intellectual process, and how profound the depth of the grief can be.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, I think we try to comfort ourselves with, if I know this intellectually, I know it. And then the heart tells us quite differently. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Carol. This may sound odd, but when you said that you cried, I imagine quite deeply for 3 hours, to me that actually sounded beautiful, that there was a beauty in that experience and sort of the exquisite nature of your appreciation of the losses that your children are going to experience.
I was very grateful for the experience, very, and shocked just to discover I shouldn't be. It's like that by the end of the day, the depth of that was no longer there. You know, just the way as human beings, these things are experienced, they're released, they're experienced, they're released.
Yeah.
They're of resiliency.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah, it's trusting that the heart does what the heart needs to do. Yeah, thank you. Joni.
Well, first, thank you, Carol. That was lovely. In our group, we talked just briefly about Dead for a Day. And Ruby, when you just mentioned a moment ago that space of discomfort, it reminded me of the experience I had when I spent about 6 hours working with a day where I was not in existence. And one of the things that I did was I took a walk around a pond. And it's a pond where there are nutria, which is an invasive species here in Oregon. And the nutria were all gone. So the question came up, like, where did they go? Well, they were animals that were brought here from South America to use for the fur trade. But they still pop up in pockets because they were all released at some point in the 70s. But in our town, they're considered invasive. They eat the reeds. They take into the Parks and Rec department does not keep them. They destroy them. So here I am walking around the pond, thinking about myself no longer being here. And what happened, in the book it says, we grieve for ourselves. I couldn't grieve for myself, even though it was my dead for the day, at least at that moment. And I think it was a part of the space for discomfort. I was uncomfortable in that moment walking around the pond, so my mind went to the nutria. My mind wanted to be elsewhere. It didn't want to be about me being gone. It wanted to be about something else being gone, being destroyed. And I don't see death as destruction, not at least in my moment right now. I think in our world we do have death as destruction. But I was thinking about that. And in our group, someone said, having compassion for the people that, because we're talking about passion and pity, having compassion for the people that had to take on that task of removing the nutria. That took me to another level of even saying compassion for myself that couldn't think about myself being gone because I wanted to be not gone and I wanted to think about the nutria. And it became this circle, sort of a spiral of like recognizing avoidance, like, oh, I'm here and I'm not here. I'm walking this path. I'm kind of pretending it's my dead for the day. It really wasn't, because I was elsewhere with some critters in a pond. So it's something for me to take and explore even more. This is chapter 36, A Good Day to Die. And I wonder where that will pop up again. Should I go forward and have another day where I say, what will the world be like without me? Right? What will I avoid the next time I do this, walking or living in my house or cooking or doing whatever I do? What's that avoidance going to be? And what will that look like? And how will I feel it in my body? You know, and I just think it was such a treasure, that moment where someone said, you know, we can have compassion for the people that do these harmful things as part of their job. So there was this whole rainbow or a whole arc of discussion around myself not being here, but my ego really wouldn't let myself go. So.
Yeah, it is an interesting experiment to watch the ego when we take on something like, I'm going to practice today as if I'm already dead, to see what the ego does with that. It's a very, very interesting experiment. Yeah, thank you, Joni. Sandy, over to you.
Hi, we'll try this again. I am having internet problems, so if I get bounced out again, Ruby, you can jump in for me. Thank you. So what a beautiful segue into our rest of our time together. The poem said, to love that well which thou must leave are long. And today we are going to spend some time talking about loss and grief and looking a little bit more deeply into this. By this stage of life, we've probably all had significant losses. Some of you may have experienced significant losses early in your life, like the divorce of your parents, the death of a grandparent that you were close to, the death of a much-loved pet, or perhaps even the death of your parent or close relative or friend. You know, I know my husband's dad died when my husband was 5 years old, so his experience with loss started very early. For others, our first real experience of loss may have come later in our life. But throughout our lives, we've suffered losses, such as the loss of a job, the loss of a lover or life partner, or even the loss of a child. And at this stage of life, we're experiencing the losses of aging, which may be physical, hearing and flexibility, mobility, those types of things, mental, cognitive losses. So take a few minutes right now and just consider the losses you've experienced in your life, and just think of what comes to mind when you think of a loss you've experienced. What would you name as a significant loss for you? Just briefly, if anybody wants to share a significant loss that came to mind right away for them. Carol? I don't know if you're applauding me or you wanted to put your hand
That was, I pushed the wrong thing.
up.
The loss I thought of, and which I always think of, is that I didn't meet my dad till I was 8 years old. And
Mm,
that I think of as the most significant loss in my life.
wow, yeah. Kathy.
Sorry, I can't find my little hand. I don't know where it went. When I was about 6 years old, there were three kids, uh, very young children, who drowned in the Grand River very near my hometown. And
Mm,
so my first funeral, I walked in the doors of the church holding my mother's hand and saw these three tiny little caskets. And that
mm,
has just stayed with me my whole life. But that was the first one.
wow, thank you. Anyone else? Deb?
Probably the loss of my first marriage. I know we're talking about death of individuals, and this is something to focus on, but loss can be very profound and heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
I also find that there were so many deaths in my family within a couple year time period. I was confused about who I was grieving for. I think there must be something called complex grief or multiple grief.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Well, that's probably a good way to move into this conversation on grief. It's typical to suffer a specific type of pain when there's a loss. That pain of loss is what we call grief. Oh, I'm sorry. Sue, Sue, did you want to say something? I saw your
Oh,
hand go up.
yeah, I was just going to identify a loss as a high school student having sung in the choir, and there was a special conference. And uh, I remember the conductor saying, "We will never hear this sound again exactly this way, that we are together." And two of our choir members were killed on the way home. So it just made it so real at that age that was really, you know, true. And it took me a while to process through that. So
Yeah.
it was the beginning of my learnings. Thank you.
Wow. Um, a definition that we like for grief is a natural experience that helps a person process the pain of loss and move toward healing. And everybody is probably familiar with the concept of the stages of grief. The 5 stages of grief were first articulated by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969 in her book on death and dying. More recently, grief expert David Kressler has added 2 more stages to the list, and we're going to go through them. And one thing to keep in mind is that these are not necessarily linear. You don't always move from one to the other, and they don't appear in any particular order. And we may move between or among them just randomly, and that everyone experiences and processes grief differently. So it's like that warning on things that says your experience may differ. When we talk about grief, that's very true. So the first one is shock. We're going to look at these that we're going to look at. This stage may be the first, and it arises as numbed disbelief in response to the learning of a loss and may serve as an emotional buffer to prevent someone from feeling overwhelmed. It's almost like a self-protection that you just, it's like you're protected from the depth of the grief. And denial is the next one. This is refuting the reality of the loss or any associated feelings. Although the person may outwardly admit that the loss has happened, the interior reality is something like, this can't have happened, or they've just gone away, they haven't really died. And shock and denial help people manage in the immediate aftermath of a loss. And as I said, they kind of protect us and buffer us. The third stage is anger. And anger is a natural arising emotion in response to loss. The person experiencing the loss may direct their anger toward the person who died or left, towards medical professionals, toward family members, towards religious entities, or others. And anger may arise to replace the numbness of shock and denial, and can be seen as a way of coming out of shock and denial. It can be very disconcerting for people when they feel that depth of anger. Bargaining, we know we're experiencing this stage when we have thoughts like, I will do anything if you only bring the person back. Guilt may accompany bargaining because we may be willing to think of something that may harm another as the price of not having to experience the depth of the loss. Depression. In this stage, we experience feelings of emptiness and intense sadness. It can involve withdrawal from daily activities and engaging in things we've enjoyed. While this is difficult, feeling the emptiness and sadness is a necessary step toward healing and accepting the new reality of life in the face of the loss. And Carol, I appreciated when you shared earlier and just let yourself have those feelings, to just sit with them and not try to get rid of them, but to just accept that that's feelings were there and to let them come. I think that was beautiful for me. And then testing, this was added by Kressler. Testing is the process of trying to find solutions to deal with the loss. We try various ways of working with the intense feelings involved in grief. We work out new identities that may result from the loss, such as now being divorced or widowed. And then acceptance. This is the final stage, but remember we talked that these can go in any order, so final may not be final. This is the final stage of the grieving process. It may not happen all at once. We may experience some degree of acceptance and then find ourselves experiencing depression again. Acceptance doesn't mean we're okay with the loss or that there's no longer pain. Rather, we realize and accept that the loss is our new reality. We accept that life will not continue as it did before, but it will go on. This may involve reorganizing roles and forming new relationships. And it's common for grief and reactions to reemerge and resurge in response to triggers such as birthdays and anniversaries, special events, holidays, hearing songs, visiting places we shared with the person. And sometimes we don't even know what triggered the grief. It just, something did, Yeah. Ruby.
And so there are different types of grief. And what you're going to see now is a medical model. So I would urge caution. We need to be wary because different people grieve differently, and this model doesn't really, in some senses, take that into account. Grief doesn't always show up for everyone as an emotional response like crying. For example, there are people who work with loss by becoming very task-oriented rather than crying or even appearing at all upset. And the culture that we live in influences how grief is expressed as well. I like to tell a story here about a young woman whose father died, and her mother saw that she did not appear to be responding emotionally in any way at all, and her mother began pathologizing her daughter, telling her how awful it was that she wasn't grieving her father. She was a terrible person for not grieving her father. And it wasn't until she was in her 30s and she finally saw a therapist who affirmed for her that grief looks different for everyone. And she began to heal from the experience of her mother's expectations of what her grief should look like. So again, although we have this model, we need to take it with a grain of salt and honor how grieving appears for everyone. So here's a listing of types of grief. And the first one is what we call anticipatory grief. And this is what happens when we think about or expect a loss that has not yet happened. It includes many of the same emotions that we may experience after the loss. And we may feel anticipatory grief when contemplating the loss of someone dear to us, or the impending loss of a job or a relationship, or even the losses around aging that we ourselves have not yet experienced. And it's likely that unless the loss happens quickly or unexpectedly, we will deal with the anticipatory grief of our loved ones if we are the ones who are dying, such as in our year to live experiment. At the hospital where I volunteer as a Buddhist chaplain, I met with a young patient who shared with me that he was concerned about his family. He had a particularly virulent form of leukemia, and it was severe enough that even at the age of 15, he was well aware that he was going to die soon. He shared that he was worried about their grief, which was his own form of anticipatory grief. And so he and I had the chance to actually talk about that. And for him to work with the idea that his family was going to grieve, and he simply could not spare them from that pain. The next is what we call normal or common grief. And that's what we typically refer to when the loss has occurred and we're going through some form of those 5 or 7 stages that Sandy talked about. And then someone mentioned this what we call complicated or pathologic grief. And again, with words like pathologic, I urge great caution. And we call grief complicated or pathologic when it resembles diagnosable depression, which is different than the depression that is a stage of normal grieving. Or if someone is experiencing generalized anxiety disorder. It may deviate from normal grief in any of the following ways. Absent or inhibited grief. This is when the person we think should be grieving is manifesting little evidence of distress or yearning when it would otherwise be expected. And this may look like denial, but the fact that it goes on is what indicates to us that it is not simply the denial of the stages of grieving. Delayed grief. This is when the manifestations of grief occur much later than is typical. Chronic grief. This is when the manifestations of grief persist over what we might consider to be a prolonged duration. That is, the person isn't going through the stages of grief. They appear to be stuck. And distorted grief, this is what we call extremely intense manifestations of grief. And again, I'd be careful with this one, especially when it comes to cultural differences around grieving. And then persistent, prolonged, or complex grief. This is a type of complicated grief involving intense sorrow after 12 months have passed, or 6 months for children and adolescents. And again, please remember that this is a medical model with specific diagnoses that we're talking about. The intensity and pervasiveness of the reactions can cause disability. So when we talk about someone who is completely disabled by grief and unable to function, that would be called persistent, prolonged, or complex grief. And the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, recognizes prolonged grief as an independent disorder. And, oh, sorry, Carol has put in the chat, unfortunately it only came to me, but that his name is David Kessler, not Kressler. And he actually worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross at one point. And that in general, the grief community does not promote the staging of grief. Like everything, there are current grief models that many in the field do a better job of speaking about grief. I would be interested, actually, Carol, if you could share the information of what some of those models are. And it also could be helpful to speak about non-finite losses and ambiguous loss, and perhaps after the next breakout room, Carol, you could share some of that information with us. That would be really helpful. So again, as I've been saying, we need to be wary of this medical model. It gives us useful information, but different people grieve differently. And I can use myself as an example. I am a task-oriented griever. When I experience a loss, I move into what needs to be done, what needs to happen, because there's always practical things that need to happen in the aftermath of a loss. This made me perfect for my family because my mother, who had mental illness of her own, needed to be the star of the show after my father died, and we needed someone to step in and take care of all of he was the only one who handled the family finances, for example. We needed someone to step in and do that. And so whether that might otherwise have been my form of grieving, I'm not sure, but it certainly worked well within the family. So we need to be able to honor however we see grief in ourselves and in others. And remember that what may be acceptable or even a typical expression of grief in one culture may be viewed as complicated, pathologic, persistent, prolonged, or complex grief in another. So we're now going to go into our breakout rooms and talk about our experiences with loss and grief. Let me... This slide has some suggestions. Oh, Gary, did you have your hand up before we do that? Yeah, please.
Yes, just wanted to mention or add to that group. A few years ago, I was involved with survivors of suicide and homicide, and also some issues of traumatic grief and problems in which the trauma makes confronting the issue or even just avoidance necessary because it's so overwhelming and the images that can be horrific. Or it can be profound guilt that blocks grief because of suicide and feeling something should have been done. Or it can be profound rage that, and desire for vengeance against someone has murdered your child. And that those things can also block, natural progression of grief.
Yeah. Thank you. And, Sandy and I are always looking for ways that we can improve what we present. Should we do this again? So we will appreciate the feedback to help us improve the presentation. So thank you, Gary, and thank you, Carol, for pointing those out. Okay, so in our breakout rooms, here are some suggested questions for consideration. What has been my experience with loss throughout my life? How am I dealing with the losses of aging currently? How do I grieve, or how have I grieved losses in my life? So, what is my own particular expression of grief? And what is it like to think about dealing with the anticipatory grief of my loved ones as I'm getting closer to death? And Brenda will put all of those into the chat so that they'll go into the breakout rooms with us. And once we open the breakout rooms, we'll have 30 minutes. And one of us actually will put those in the breakout room. It might as well in the chat to carry it. So
it should be in the chat now.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. So Brenda will open the breakout rooms now and give us a reminder when we're about halfway through. So welcome back. So before we move into closing our 11th session, is there anything that came up in your breakout room that you'd like to share? Bill.
Yeah, I'd just like to share that I really am amazed and appreciative of the level of depth that we've been able to share with each other, our group. It's been really, truly wonderful and impactful.
Thank you.
At a
Thank
very
you
deep
for
level.
sharing that. And, one of the things we'll talk about in July is possibilities. If your group or another group may want to continue meeting as a wisdom circle, that has happened. So there is that possibility. Thank you. Cindy.
I would like Gary Carlson to share the last words that he said that you often say, please.
If you feel comfortable.
If you, feel he will.
Well, this has to do with a mantra which I use when I'm meditating. It's something that I made up, I believe, quite a few years ago because of work in men's circles where the term comes up, mitaquiasan, which is a native term for all my relations. And what I came up with that I use as a mantra is breathing in, I share the breath of all my relations, meaning all the plants, animals, everything around me. Breathing out, I share my breath with the world. And that just feels really good to me to have that sense of community that I feel when I think about sharing my breath with all my relations.
Beautiful. I may have to borrow that, Gary.
Please do.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, Sandy.
So we'd like to remind you one more time that the end is getting nearer and we only have a very few months left. So here's your reminder. You have about 1 month left. What remains undone before you die? What remains for you to still attend to? And we'll go over next month's practice. There are a lot of different practices for the 12th month. Going to be cramming a lot in. So we put them on 2 slides. And as always, anything in these practices, if it doesn't fit for you, don't worry about it. These are meant to support you, and if they don't, then please feel free to leave them. So begin to concentrate on the outgoing aspect of the body sensation sweeping practice. Bring your attention to the top of the head as often as possible. Become familiar with the subtle sensations of the scalp and follow the sensations into the space above the head, and follow the sensations into the space above the head. So practice with joy and a sense of renewed investigation into what it is that dies and what it is that doesn't. Practice lightly and with a growing openness to the unknown. Make room for the truth to present itself as it will, and don't hold on to that either. This is the last month of the rest of your life. Say goodbye to loved ones in the center of your heart. Thank your body for its perseverance under difficult circumstances and have mercy on it when it pleads to be released from pain. With kindness and clarity, say farewell to this life and prepare for the renewal of death. And at the end of the year, disband the group. Those who wish to continue the process of consciousness exploration may form a new after-death group. And we were talking about this earlier, what that could look like, and we'll be bringing that conversation into July as well. Our next meeting is June 17th, and your reading is chapter 37 to the end of the book. And at our next meeting, we're going to be doing our last guided meditation, in which we will dive for a good part of the session, and Ruby will be leading us through that. And so please make sure you have what you need to be comfortable for that time. If you want to lie down on the floor, you might want a blanket or something, or a mat, something to lay on, but there will be a longer meditation. So we'll remind you of that in the email that we send out before the next session as well. So as always, we end our gathering with the blowing out of the candle, and with the extinguishing of this candle, may the wisdom it represents in each of us and in all of us move out and spread into the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more month.
One more.
Bye, thank you.